Looking back over the 34 years since the Assumptions That Affect Our Lives book came out, I can say without hesitation that the overall condition of society is far worse today than it was back then. When I wrote the book, it was written from the perspective of a passenger ship fast approaching an iceberg. But if I wrote it today, I would write from the perspective of a passenger ship having struck an iceberg. We are in an all-hands-on-deck situation. The iceberg has put a gash in the side of our ship. How many compartments have been breached is the question. The Titanic was built to withstand a breaching of 4 compartments, but in her case, 5 were breached. One thing I know for sure is we have an urgent need for quality Christian education. We need thousands of first-rate, affordable Christian schools and homeschool co-ops. The fact that you are watching this video is a testimony to your own commitment to Christian education, for which I'm grateful. Thank you. As was mentioned in the introduction to Chapter 7, Christian education is about equipping the next generation to govern well over this material world. That means equipping today's students to be tomorrow's Christ-honoring participants in business, law, education, the media, and the arts, public policy, and civil service, as well as Christ-honoring carpenters, electricians, and homemakers, not to mention pastors and missionaries. Well, succeeding in this task involves helping students to see all subjects at all grade levels in the context of the bigger picture that truly makes sense and really matters. The bigger picture that brings meaning to math, science, history, and language. I'm talking about the bigger picture of the biblical view of God, creation, humanity, moral order, and purpose, otherwise known as the biblical worldview. Skilled Christian teachers do this intentionally. They plan for it as intentionally as they plan for any other lesson objective. They help students to make connections between 2 + 2 = 4 and God's purpose for numbers. They help students make connections between learning to write well and God's purpose for communication. The question is, how exactly do teachers do this? Well, let me show you one example. This example has been greatly edited for the sake of time here, but you'll get the basic idea. How did it come about that you gave a lesson on snails?
Well, in our reading curriculum, we have a book called No Longer a Nobody by Matilda Nordtvedt. And in the book, we talked about each box.
Okay. And under humanity, what did you put?
How can we find real joy in snails?
And then under the area of moral order?
What is best about snails? What's the best?
Fascinating question. And then in the area of purpose?
What purpose does God see in a snail?
And finally, the area of God.
How do you think God feels about snails?
So you prepared ahead of time. You weren't just winging this, right?
No, and that's the key, I think, is to find your questions and to find the Bible verses that back the questions ahead of time. So you have a bigger, broader concept for the whole lesson.
Okay. Each group then was working simultaneously in their table, so to speak.
Yes.
And they were talking to one another, but
Yes.
you had told them, okay, this group over here is going to talk about what do you think God feels, how do you think God feels about snails? And
Yes.
so they were talking about that as a group, while this other group's talking about what joy can we find in snails.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I told them they had to discuss amongst themselves, and then they could write their answers. They could also draw pictures to go with the little box.
But, you know, Kim, I think this points out the fact that there is not a single academic topic that you couldn't contextual. I like to use the word contextualize, putting that subject into the context of this bigger picture of reality. This teacher was being intentional, using a tool called the conversation starter. She was trained to use it along with the other teachers at her school. They were equipped to use a variety of tools, such as the truth and baloney detector, the awesome activator, and the Daddy Plan. These different tools are used for different occasions, like, well, different occasions for using a pipe wrench versus a saw. If you're curious about these tools and you want to know more, I'll include a link in the description area below. The link is to a free online resource called Eliminating the Sacred Secular Divide. Let me conclude with one more example of contextualization from Kim Tarr, the second grade teacher at Lighthouse Christian School in Gig Harbor, Washington. There was another occasion where you used the conversation starter with your kids. You were doing a study on Annie Sullivan, I believe, right? How is it that you decided to use the conversation starter for this lesson? What prompted you to think this might work well?
Well, we do not see a lot of blind people. The children haven't been exposed to that. And so I wanted them to think from God's perspective.
Yeah.
About Annie Sullivan, blind. What was her life like? What did God think about her? And how does God view her?
Yes. And I gather on this lesson, you actually handed out the physical conversation starter, and you had them write in answers to these boxes, correct?
Yes. Each child had their very own, in this case, and they were able to decorate them afterwards.
Great. Well, let's walk through this for the sake of those who are looking here. So tell us what you picked for the God box, and let's walk around here.
How do you think God feels about Annie Sullivan?
Yes, and the creation box, what did you put there?
I had, after God created the world, he said it was good. What is still good about being blind in this fallen world?
That's a remarkable question. And again, are these second graders?
They are second graders, and this was an amazing lesson, I have to admit. This
well,
so deeply, and it was just very, very, very good.
So they connected to these questions.
They did.
You were guiding this a little bit, and yet you weren't downloading information per se. You were letting them connect the dots.
In this case, each group was given scriptures to read together.
And what did you put down in the humanity area?
What were Annie Sullivan's positive character qualities?
Beautiful question. Yeah. And in the moral order area?
How could teaching a blind and deaf child be done in a God-honoring way?
Yeah.
They wrote, be calm and don't get mad.
Good point.
Keep trying. If it's hard, if they don't understand some of the language, keep trying.
How about the area of purpose?
How did Annie Sullivan give Helen Keller more purpose in her life? It gave such a deep understanding of God's point of view of both the teacher and the student in that case. And it was just delving so deep, deeper than I would have thought that second graders could go.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
Christian school teachers and homeschooling parents, we really need you. You are on the front lines. And my prayer is that you'll be as effective as possible in helping the next generation to contextualize whatever it is you're teaching them by seeing how it relates to the biblical view of God, creation, humanity, moral order, and purpose. That's authentic education. May the Lord bless you in your continuing walk with Him through some of the most challenging times we've seen in well over a century. Remember, Jesus is Lord of all.